to digitize this type of supply chain is a massive task. We can't do it alone. We have to use technology. Another thing interesting about Li&Fung is that we're 110 years old this year. So we think that's a great accomplishment. But following some of the earlier speakers that get up here that have been in business, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, the technology world is very different. So I'd like to say that perhaps Li&Fung represents the old economy, and technology represents the new economy. And where we're positioned in our supply chain is we're bringing the two together. So what are the tools in the new economy that can help us grow our business and take it to the next level? So why a digital supply chain? Again, as I spoke with a bunch of other industry experts on this, everyone had a different view of it. And so for Li&Fung, it's very simple. Okay, why digital? Why do we have to digitize it? For us, the answer is we want to make our supply chain better. So oftentimes when people say, well, Li&Fung, Robert, what are you doing to digitize? What are you doing to make your supply chain better? And people always want to know what you're doing. And for me, it's not as important as what we're doing. We want to start off with why we're doing it. So we start off with the why, and then we looked at, okay, how do we go about it? What are the technologies that we need to bring into the group, into our supply chain, for the purpose of making it better? So before we can do that, we have to take a look at what are some of our supply chain challenges. Now, for you, those of you in the audience, you may have a different set of challenges, but I'd just like to review with you, the path that we took and the experiences that we looked at, or things we looked at in terms of how to make our supply chain better. So the challenges are production costs are going up. So all the inputs to production, whether it's the cost of labor, the cost of raw material, the cost of energy, through time, we know that all of those inputs will go up. Over the last 18 months, we've had a bit of a reprieve with some of our raw material costs that's helped keep production costs down. But by and large, we know that production costs are going to continue to go up. Middle management, there's a lot of challenges in our supply chain with middle management. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the SMEs in Asia, the manufacturers that we work with across China and Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent, were entrepreneurs that came in and they had all the inputs to production that were in their favor. They had low-cost labor, low-cost raw material, low-cost energy costs. They were able to open up factories in China, in many cases, get free land. So because of that, they never really developed a strong middle management. So we see that as a big challenge in our supply chain today. As costs go up and factories have to get better, they lack some of the middle management skills to actually achieve that. Customer expectations are growing. Whether it's the consumer expectation or the retailer and brand expectation, everyone wants more and they want it faster. And data disaggregation is another big problem that we see within our supply chain. And think about this within your area as well. We have a lot of great data, but it all subsides in different areas. So how do you bring that data together? So these are some of the challenges. All of that in the context, again, of speed. How do you do it fast? We want it now. So around that, Li&Fung, we've taken a look at our supply chain. Remember those 16,000 factories that we look at, and we say, okay, how can we make it performance-driven? Looking back on the last 30 years, I can say from experience, I've been in Asia 34 years, we've gone from country to country chasing low cost. We've chased low-cost labor from Korea, Taiwan, Japan, into Southeast Asia, into southern China, into northern China, and now we're all over the map. We're in Myanmar, we're in Bangladesh, we're in India, we're in Indonesia, and a lot of our supply chains now are looking at going into Africa. So, we spent the last 30, 35 years chasing low cost. We believe that the supply chains of the future that are going to be the most valuable ones and performance-driven are the ones that really take a look at how can we make it better. What's the performance piece of it? So to do that, there's really two parts that we looked at, and I'll have to say that Li&Fung as a group, we're looking at a lot of different initiatives, things that we can digitize. This is just one function. We're saying, how can we take those 16,000, 15,000 factories and make them better? So we're looking at two areas to improve their performance. Number one is raw material utilization, and the second one is labor productivity. So how do we get the information? How do we get the data in terms of how factories are actually performing? So came up with the question of how do you make it better if you can't measure it? So the initial thought was, okay, we exist at Li&Fung in the vendor supply chain area. Okay, we exist because we want to make the supply chain better. But if you can't measure it, what's the starting point? So with that, we thought, okay, what are the tools that we can use to better capture information, capture data across our supply chain, so we can get the data and draw insight and action from that data. So this is one of the things that we're currently implementing. We have 35 factories that we're working with that represent about $500 to $600 million at FOB, a small part of our supply chain, but we think it's a very good start. To digitize them. They're all at different stages of digitization right now. So basically what we're looking at is deploying sensors and RFID technology across the manufacturing platform to get information on the production. And this is all real time. So that we'll know when a factory has the raw material, when they start cutting the fabric, when they start sewing the fabric, and when they finish the packing. So by putting sensors in our factories, we're able to, again, capture it real time and integrate that into our own order tracking systems and data and information that we give to our customers. So that's part of the big picture here. One key component of this is that you take a look at the garment there, underneath there it says RFID. So what's happening in our industry today is that a lot of brands and retailers are starting to put RFID tags on their merchandise, item level tagging. So retailers like Marks and Spencer, Zara, Decathlon, these are all, if you go into a Zara, if any of you have shopped at a Zara, when they take the tag, that plastic tag off your merchandise at the till, that actually has an RFID identifier. So as brands and retailers start to put RFID components onto the garment, we're seeing this as an opportunity to really bring the supply chain together. And what I mean by that is that the shirt or the blouse or the dress that you're wearing, in the future we'll be able to say, that dress was made in this country, at this factory on this date. The fabric came from this mill in China, and the cotton came from India or Turkmenistan or USA. So what that gives us is full transparency across our supply chain. So what happens now is that the product becomes the central point. So I can capture all the information on the product and then share that across the supply chain. I'll be able to say, where did the cotton come from? Where did the yarn come from? Where did the fabric come from? The second point, by linking up the metadata, by digitizing these 15,000 factories, I'll be able to say, where was it made at? This item level tagging moves on into distribution. So it allows you to track it from the factory to the warehouse, to the retail environment, or even to the consumer. And then on to the retail store, and as I said, consumer experience. So these are, for the Li&Fung, for our supply chain, you can see it's incredibly complex when you start really from raw material all the way to consumer experience. So we're looking at how we can link all of this together. We have some really interesting projects that we're working on actually for the Internet of Things, item level tagging, and incorporating technology into product, so that the consumer can interface with that product after they buy it from the store. Why is that important? We can link a consumer to an app, to a smartphone, and that gives the brand data about how that consumer is actually using the product, where he's using the product. So it's all I guess a race to start to collect data across the supply chain and how product is actually being used. So the data visualization piece of it, this is kind of the magic of it all. Again, being able to track from cotton to manufacturing, to supply chain, to the retail store, and finally the consumer experience. Okay, so what does all this mean? You remember earlier on I talked about data disaggregation. So right now we have a lot of great information about our manufacturing base. We know their turnover. We have information about their quality, compliance, social compliance, making sure there's no health issues or child labor issues or other labor issues at the factory. We have great information about delivery and testing, but we have very little information about the productivity of the factory. Now, thinking back to the slide where I talked about the digital supply chain and digitizing the factory, it's not new to industry, actually. If you go into an Apple manufacturing plant, if you go into a Boeing plant, if you go into any major car manufacturer, they're all using this type of technology in their plants today. But the SMEs that we work with, it hasn't been affordable to them. It's affordable now because the technology and the cost of technology has come down to a point where we can now take this type of manufacturing practice and introduce it into our supply chain, into these SMEs. So now what we get with our existing data sources, combining that with performance and productivity, we're able to really see the efficiency of our supply chain. Now, what does all of this mean? Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And so I think the big access or the big play here is all about getting more data across our supply chain. That data will allow us to say, okay, now that we have the data, how can we monetize that? Is there added value to that? Value to our customers, value to our consumers, value to our manufacturing base. So the data piece of it is really important, not only from how can we monetize that data, but also will it generate additional revenue models for the company. So to summarize, the digital supply chain enables visibility across the supply chain. Thinking back to the last presentation, again, it's all about the data and the information. Some of the factories that we've digitized, they're just happy to have real-time information about what's happening on their platform, on their factory floor. So they're so happy just to have the data that they forget about the insight piece of it. And so the next step for us is to sit down with our manufacturers, sit down with the vendors across our supply chain and say, okay, here's what this data means to you. Let's take that insight and turn it into action to make the factories better. A good corollary on that is that we know that some of our factories that we've digitized in Bangladesh, their productivity is half of the productivity that you get in China. So before we couldn't measure that, now we can. So once we're able to measure that, we can say with definity in terms of how we can, where are the bottlenecks in production? How can we work with these vendors to improve their performance? If they're better, we're better, and it helps our customer. So it gives us sustainability, traceability, accountability, and performance across our supply chain, all from digitizing and collecting the information. Okay. All well and said, but what are some of the internal challenges to this? Nothing is easy, right? And so I think that not just within Li&Fung, but certainly a lot of the factories and people that we worked with to digitize, some of the big challenges are conservative management. We've seen a big change in that, though, with a lot of the vendors that we worked with across Asia, especially with the second generation. So a lot of the sons and daughters are coming back from their MBA studies, in USA or in Europe, and now they're running Dad's factory, and they know there has to be a different way. So that conservative management is starting to change. That mindset's starting to change to the younger mindset. Financial resources and ROI. So I would say here that a lot of what we get, a lot of the pushback that we get is that, well, how much does it cost to do this? Okay, what's the return on our investment? What's the payback? All good questions, but what I like to say is that for a lot of these factories, you have to take your investment in digitalization and you almost have to park it and look at it in a different light. If you're looking at it the same way that you traditionally look at other investments, then you may be missing the boat. You take a look at Uber, and when they started the company, did they have a finance team that's saying, well, we're not sure if we should do this. What's the ROI? Do you think they even cared about the ROI? Probably not. Okay, so I think a lot of these investments in digitalization, in creating, adopting new technology into your own business model, I think you have to look at it with a completely different lens than your traditional investment in IT infrastructure. Which leads to the next point, legacy IT structure. I see a lot of IT departments with companies that we work with. The IT people get involved, and they want to house all the data themselves. Okay, they want to go it alone and say, well, geez, we can do it all alone. So I think that the legacy IT structures sometimes get in the way of digitalization. And that's not a rap on the IT guys. I think it's just the fact that technology is advancing so quickly that a lot of our companies, a lot of the companies that you work for, the IT groups just aren't. They don't have the skill set or the background really to pull it off. So I think it's something that everyone has an internal challenge on: legacy IT structure and infrastructure, business relevancy, and finally you How do you change the mindset of a corporation to adopt a new technology and to enter into this digital age? I think if you came up in this new digital world, this transformational age, it's easy because you live with it. But there's a lot of companies out there that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, in our case 110 years, that don't quite have the mindset yet. I can say, I'm quite pleased that Li&Fung, our new our CEO Spencer Fung, has taken this technology challenge and said this is very important to our group. So having that change of mindset, having that thought leadership at the top of an organization really helps. Okay, so what are the next steps? There's some questions here. I'm not going to ask you, but maybe just a quick show of hands. How many in the audience are currently implementing or planning to digitize significant parts of their supply chain? Anyone working on this out there? A few, okay. So a few takeaways I would say: don't be afraid to disrupt your own business. Sometimes if you disrupt your own business and you start to digitize and bring in these tools, you're going to find new additional revenue streams and new business models. Learn to predict and adapt to the change. History is filled with companies that are no longer in existence because they failed to predict and adapt to change. There's the companies that used to make typewriters, and a great company like Kodak. Kodak actually saw the change coming for digitalization. They had one of the first digital cameras out there, but they failed to bring it to the marketplace. So learn to predict and learn to adapt to the change. Old economy and new economy businesses need each other. I'm the first one to say if Li&Fung would be considered an old economy business, we've been in existence for 110 years. The things that we're doing today in terms of digitizing our supply chain, there's no way we could do it by ourselves. We need each other. Every year I go to the NRF show, National Retail Federation show in New York. And when you go there, you go to the main floor, you have all the big technology companies are there. IBM is there, and Samsung and Google. If you go to the IBM booth, they're filled with solutions there. And as you dig a little bit deeper into the solutions, you find out that a lot of these solution providers are IBM partners. It's not IBM. So even firms like IBM realize, as perhaps an old economy business that is able to adapt and remake itself, they realize that they can't go it alone. They need to have the new economy businesses. And likewise, the new economy businesses, need the more established businesses to get people to uptake their technologies. So the two are not mutually exclusive. I think the two economies can work very well together. Again, don't go it alone. Research and find the right partners. So a lot of the things that Li&Fung is doing across our supply chain to digitize various activities, what I showed you today is just one of the initiatives. I can share it with you because it's what my team is working on. But there's a multitude of solutions in terms of what we're doing to digitize activity across our supply chain. Some are customer-facing, brand-facing, retailer-facing. Others are manufacturing-facing. But the key is that find the right partners and that share the same values as you and can support you with the solutions that you're looking for. Okay, and finally, act now. Don't wait for tomorrow. It's too late. All right, so with that, thank you.